Welcome to T-Smack, home of the T-Smack. May I take your order?
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Talking Smack, where we talk superheroes, movies, animation, comics, and so much more. I'm your host, Josh Scar. I am the only smackhead here with you today, but that does not mean I'm flying solo. This week, I am joined by one of the godfathers of our podcast, Brendan from the podcast Unchefed. Brendan, how you doing?
Hey man, I really like the T-Smack home with the T-Smack thing. That brings me back.
Yeah, that was a really good riff that Beppo had done, and it has become part of our regular intros. I try to customize them to theme out, and this one just feels fairly appropriate given our history.
That was our first conversation was on Good Burger. It was
Yep.
so much fun.
Yeah, that still rings true in my brain every now and then, which if you haven't, I'll link it in the episode description. Go back, listen to this is like a year and a half ago now, which is insane.
I know, right?
Is in March of 2022. We were pretty fresh from coming back to the podcasting game. Brendan's like, hey, anyone want to do a guest spot? And I'm like, I would love to do a guest spot, but I don't know how I would fit into your show. And you're like, oh, we want to talk about like MasterChef, kitchen nightmares, whatever. I'm like, I don't watch any of that shit. Can we talk about Good Burger? And you're like, yes.
I was on board with that idea so hard. Like just right off the bat, I was like, fuck yeah, we're gonna do Good Burger. Oh, do you do the cursing on that? I might.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, good.
Yeah, it's a fantastic episode. And even Matt, like, as grumpy as he was about having to watch Good Burger, is just a good time because he was having fun with it, doing the cow voice and everything.
That was that's like one of those moments where you realize just how much fun you can have behind the scenes with a podcast, because like everything that went into the show was good. You know, it was like more insightful, I think, than you would think an episode about Good Burger could
Yeah.
be. But like trolling Matt behind the scene, like I'd call him up and I'd be like, hey buddy, are you watching Good Burger? He's like, god damn it, I don't want to watch this movie. He was so mad about having to watch it.
It was such a good time though, and he was a good sport about it. And I apologize for my voice. I am recovering from a cold, so if I sound a little nasally at times, I think I caught it from Chat Tsunami. I know they had it a few weeks ago, but I've been catching up on podcasts this week, and Satsu had his, so now I think I've caught it. I will endure. So
For you, the listener, dig down deep.
So I apologize if you don't like the nasally Fran Drescher voice that I'm putting on this week, but I love podcasting, and I'm not going to miss a week unless I'm very, very ill.
Oh, you know what I can do that might help you out here? I can do like some really no, that's awful. I'm trying to. That was actually my attempt to do a Fran Drescher impersonation, but it's like a known fact about them in my family.
That one more like Animal from Muppet Babies.
I know it was really bad. Like the second it started coming out, I was like, no, this is not working. But it's like if I could, I would do that for you. If I could do like a Fran Drescher just to like kind of make you look better by comparison,
Mr. Sheffield,
Mr. Sheffield.
No, we love Fran, and this is the first episode we've recorded since the end of the writers' strike. So, congrats to the writers and the deal that they got, a 3-year deal that basically gave them everything they were asking for, including safeguards against AI. So, fantastic deal around there. If I had the soundboard with the applause, I would do the applause right now. Instead, I'll give you a golf clap, so I'm not blowing out anyone's eardrums. But Brendan and I are here to talk about Futurama season 11, as well as a few other things. But before we get into that, we are going to hear from our friend Antonio over at The Cultworthy. We'll be right back.
The Cultworthy Podcast. Join me, Antonio Palacios, each week as I guide you through a never-ending sea of obscure cinema and cult-worthy gems that deserve a rediscovery. Find me on all listening platforms and at thecultworthy.com. The Cultworthy Podcast. Join us.
The busiest man in podcasting.
I love Antonio, man. That is such a good dude. Like such a good dude with such an interesting perspective.
Yeah, he should be coming on for our Godzilla -1 episode that we'll be doing. I think that's our first episode scheduled for December. I'm very excited for that because anytime Antonio's on the podcast, it's just a great time. Plus, we
You
have
guys throw down. You two throw down because you're like, you've got a good way of like bridging the gap between all of our various nerd tendencies and kind of like I always saw you as like a nexus point, you know?
I'm a jack of all trades, master of none kind of guy. So I have many interests, but I never like solidify into one category because I'm just like, oh, what's this over here? What's this over there? My ADHD just won't let me pinpoint into one thing.
Uh-huh.
But Antonio and I have also discussed doing a two-parter where we'll have a couple episodes, one on Talking Smack, one on Cultworthy, where we talk about cultworthy movies based on comic books or graphic novels. So we're trying to find the time to do that one too.
Oh, have you gone back and had a conversation with him about that? Have you watched Atlanta, the TV show Atlanta?
No, I haven't. That's been on my list for forever, but it's one of those shows that I don't know that Ricky would really enjoy. So
Got it.
I have to find time to watch it on my own.
Yeah, I know.
I
I know
have
that
like
feeling.
little 5-minute spurts, and I'm not going to devote 5-minute spurts to a show like that.
It takes a little bit of sitting down. It can be very cerebral, but I personally think it's one of the best shows ever made. And towards the end, one of the last episodes it's just an interesting take on like the Goofy movie and like behind the scenes of the Goofy movie. It's
Really?
Yeah, when you get a chance to watch it, like I'm interested to hear what you have to say and like especially what you and Antonio have to say, but I'm gonna stop hijacking your mic here. It's hard when you're like friends with a guy. You're like, man, what's up? You want to talk about
Yeah.
stuff,
Oh
so
no, I totally understand. Speaking of Atlanta, we recently did a rent-free episode, moments in cinema and TV that live in your brain rent-free, and one of the people that we talked that responded to us had mentioned Liam Neeson's cameo in Atlanta, which
yeah.
I had to look it up because I was like, oh, what was that about? And holy crap, that was not what I was expecting.
It's a weird cameo. Like it's like, wow, what was the message of all that? Like there's got to be it's one of those you're like looking for the message because your brain can't process there not being a message behind like that kind of cameo. So anyways, I'm not going to say
Yeah, I'm
anymore.
not going to spoil it because I think
But,
that's something everyone should be flabbergasted by, but
for
it
sure.
was not what I was expecting. I was expecting him to just be like, oh yeah, I'm Liam Neeson. I'm here to, throw a lightsaber and not quite John Wick a guy in 27 takes.
Have a couple special skills or that were very specific or
Yeah.
something. And is that just like a bottle of Robitussin that you're drinking right now?
Oh, I wish. No, it's not going to name it, but it's sponsored by
Got it.
LeBron James, I believe. LeBron James, not a sponsor, but could be.
give Josh a call.
We're here to talk about Futurama season 11, but I recently got into a new show that I'm just like, I really need to talk to a chef about this show because it's so weirdly engaging, but like anxiety inducing all at the same time. And that show is FX. Speaking of FX shows, The Bear. We talked about it off air because I didn't want to blindside you with a question where you're just gonna be like, "No, I haven't seen it." And I'm
What?
like, "What do I do now? This is gonna be an awkward transition." So I do know you have watched The Bear. I'm not. I'm in episode 2 of season 2, so I'm not fully caught up yet. But throughout season 1, it's kind of like, what is the point of the show? Like, where's the turning point of what is the show going to become? And I found it because I was looking for something funny to watch, and this popped up in Hulu's comedy series, and I was like, I've heard a few people I know talk about this show, so
It's got funny moments.
Oh man, when they what are they, Vicodin the kids, or
I mean, who hasn't Vicodin a couple of kids,
no, Xanax. It was Xanax. One of the characters had like a prescription bottle of Xanax that they ended up throwing into some homemade ecto cooler.
Which you got to admit is pretty cool. Like just trying to make homemade ecto cooler right off the bat is like pretty cool.
But I think that was like one of the few moments where I laughed out loud in that show. Everything else, I'm like hugging my pillow because I'm like so just immersed
Stressed
in
out.
Anxiety. Like, are they going to cut a finger? Like, is Tina finally going to like Sid? Like, what's happening here? But I'm really curious as someone who has worked in a kitchen and someone who is going to school for work in the kitchen as well. How do you like The Bear?
I really did. I liked it quite a bit. I think that there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I don't know if it's like a comedy, but there's a lot of, I glamorizing what it means to work in kitchens. I think that there's sort of this popular narrative that sort of cherry picks the experience in a way that's, usually not that authentic from somebody like me who's had experience in those environments perspective. So I enjoyed it. There was one episode in the first season where they just get this deluge of tickets right off the bat, and you see this like the main character, the chef Carmi, had been forming this relationship with this guy who was getting really into pastry and was like, exploring his creativity and trying to figure out his place in the kitchen. And in the middle of this moment, this guy is like coming up with like this thing that he created, and he's like trying to get his mentor Carmi to like do a, like to give him some credit. Like he wanted some praise. He wanted some praise for doing this thing. And Carmi's like, "Are you fucking with me?" And just yells at him and like throws it on the floor and it's like, "Get back to work." And it was like, I think that more than any other show, and even more so than any other moment in that show, it sort of typified why I decided to step away from kitchens. Because like you spend all this time working on something, you spend all this time trying to cultivate something, and then in a moment like that, the reality is just like you don't actually, like, none of it really matters. Like you're just there to like get chewed up and spit out for the sake of feeding people, which is for some people, but not for others. That was kind of my big takeaway. I don't know exactly how far you want to get into this show, because as somebody with experience in this industry, I've got a lot of like
Well,
pretty big thoughts on it. But
yeah, I don't want to swerve people too far. They're here for a Futurama discussion, but like there's
exactly,
one episode fairly early on where oh geez, what's his name? Joel McHale makes a cameo appearance as like
yeah,
his head chef, lead chef at this restaurant that he was working at in New York. And he's just leaning over his shoulder saying like, "You're never going to be good enough. You're never going to be great. You're never going to succeed. Why don't you just fucking quit? You're awful. What are you doing?" Carmi's just taking, he's like, "Yes, chef. Yes, chef. Yes, chef." I'm curious as to,
he needs to take another swig of Robitussin. Everybody, not Robitussin, not endorsed by Robitussin.
not a sponsor, but could be
Not a
this
sponsor,
week.
but could be this week. Robitussin, give him a call. Are you asking if I've ever experienced that kind of
Yeah, like
situation?
how authentic is that to like a high stress or a high
I can
end
tell you the
kitchen like
name of
that?
the person who did that to me. His name is Josh Kleinman. He was one of David Chang's #1 people, and he did that exact thing to me, like over and over again for a while. It's very, very hard. Like it very much gets inside of your personality, and it very much like leaves you afterwards with like a sense of PTSD, which is probably why I'm like the type of person that's wanting to step back at this point, because like I had those kinds of experiences. Not everybody does when they go through like kitchens, but I did. Like I had that exact moment. This guy would come up and like take things that I had been working on and just ruin them, like just throw them on the floor in front of me and be like, "Now you got to make it again, and I expect you to do it quickly." And it's like, well, fuck, man, I did, God, So, but that being said, and I guess we can like, I don't know. I think that you'd probably want to get into Futurama, but just as like a parting thing, there's this scene in the second season that maybe you've gotten to, maybe you haven't, where this alarm is going off for the restaurant. It's like something's going on, and like everybody's like, "Is this not getting annoying to you?" And there's like this moment of like pure placidity where Carmi's like, "I don't mind it," and that was like
I
the
think
second
that's in
thing.
episode 1 of season 2. Yeah.
Okay, if you've seen that moment, then that's kind of like the flip side of the coin, is like when there is a serious amount of stress, like after being in environments like that, when there's like just a thing ringing in your face, like you kind of like just go into this beast mode where it's like I don't even see it. I am so conditioned to deal with this level of stress that like it's almost hard for me not to have this level of stress. Like I got to find it somewhere. But then when you got something like that, it's like I don't even hear the ringing, and while everybody else is flipping out around you. So
Interesting. So yeah, I mean, I would say I would recommend giving The Bear a shot. I think it's a good balance of TV drama and people who like cooking shows, because it does do really good food porn,
it's true.
especially if you're from the Chicagoland area. To Tim and Joey at Game Club Pod, forget about it. You get the dipped Italian beefs and just all the good stuff.
It is a really good show. Is like it's going to be different from the perspective of somebody who's been through the restaurant. Like, there's a chef named Rick Bayless who's like, "Oh, this is just like stress porn." But I don't think a lot of people that watch it like kind of see it exactly that way. Like, it is a fun show. Like, it does have its moments of like tension, but that's what stories are. Like, you want tension, you want drama, you want resolution, you want development, and I think the Bears got all of those things in spades.
All right. And speaking of things in spades, Futurama seasons 1 through 4.
That's how you segue.
Things we love. Seasons 1 through 4 of Futurama. And then somehow we've gotten 7 more seasons since then somehow. Like
You
I don't
mentioned
even
11 earlier, but like the internet calls it season 8, and like I don't
that
know. It's
makes
been
sense because the movies.
Yeah.
If you count the movies, which I'm just going by Hulu. But yeah, if you include the movies, I believe that it is season 8 because the movies should be considered separate, but because Fox bundled it all together as one package when they sold it off, the movies are segmented into like 20-30 minute chapters that don't work as individual episodes. But
No, they really don't. That was optimistic. They're like, just just do it. Just do it, man. Just like whatever. They're fans. They'll get it.
yeah, because when Comedy Central bought the rights or the syndication rights plus the new episodes, they just marathoned Futurama nonstop. So when they showed the movies, you basically just watched it in a 2-hour block with ads. So
Yeah,
or
that's right. I remember
commercials as they
doing
used to be called.
it. Yeah, for you whippersnappers out there.
But after a long hiatus of it's been probably close to 7 or 8 years, Disney bought 20th Century Television, just converted it to 20th Television. I don't know why they got rid of the Century for whatever reason, but
Branding
no, it's 20th
purposes.
Century. It's 20th Century Television. They got rid of the Fox, obviously.
I think eventually they're just gonna try and like patent the number 20. Kind of like, it's like big brands, they keep like shrinking and shrinking until they've got like the most ubiquitous image they can. So if they could just like get the
X.
number itself, yeah, exactly. Apple, like now Apple isn't even a word; it's just like that little Apple symbol.
Yep. They're Mac, iOS, whatever.
Mhm.
So Disney revived Futurama, which the revival didn't even kick off in the way you would want it to, because Joe DiMaggio is the
Joe
baseball
DiMaggio,
player.
yeah.
John DiMaggio, the voice of Bender, Randy, and many other characters on the show, he wanted equal pay. I think he wanted to be as highly paid as like Billy West and other players on the show. And he's like, I'm not taking anything less.
And notably, everybody else felt the same, from what I understand, right? Like they were kind of on his side.
Yeah, if I
about
remember,
that.
they were all on John's side. Like they were all happy with their contracts, and like if John's not happy with his contract, then he has every right to hold out.
Mm-hmm.
So it was originally announced that Bender would be voiced by someone new, and
Justin
they would integrate
Roiland.
that.
They're like, we really got to walk that one.
Was that really who they were going to bring in?
No, absolutely not. But that would be hilarious.
Okay.
You're just like, damn it, that was a miscalculation on our part.
Well, I mean, it would have been a miscalculation anyway, because people are already pissed off about the show getting revived again after the Comedy Central years, because the Comedy Central years were mostly disappointing. Coming back on another revival under the Disney banner just continue to not raise any hopes or stakes. But if you got the whole cast back, then at least there's hype about it, because you would think, well, if they got everyone back, then hopefully they're coming back for quality and not just paychecks. But John DiMaggio eventually did get paid. I think Bender's as Bender as ever. I can't say that I thought Bender was a weak spot in this show, in this season.
You don't think that he was? You think that he was true to form, true to character, moving the Bender narrative forward appropriately? That's your final take on the Bender situation?
On the Bender situation, yeah. On the Billy West Fry situation, wow, did he sound old? Like I know it's been a while, but even that first episode, I'm like, I've seen him do the Twisted Tunes panels, and he sounds fine. What happened here that he just all of a sudden, Fry is starting to sound just really weary? Like the Professor, Zoidberg, everyone else sounds fine, but his Fry just is missing something.
Oh man, now this is like the moment you got to splice in like a fry voice or something. Is that something you can do like in post, like put a fry voice here?
I can find something and send it to Alex. You can put it in. Alex, if I can get it to you, put it in here.
Season 1.
Can I ask you a question?
Hulu, Season 11.
What? No, I got out of that thing like 2 days ago.
And then you could be like, see what I mean? Yeah, I don't know. I thought so there were a couple of really big takeaways for this season for me. Pretty initially, I felt the first couple of episodes felt a little bit more like the first four seasons than I think the Comedy Central run. Is that how should we break it up? Like the first four seasons would be like the original run, and then there's the movies, and then there's the Comedy Central run, and then this will be like the new season. Is that? It's interesting
Yeah,
that you
you would
kind of have
just
to
it
have a
would just
language
be
around this.
yeah, it would just be eras. So you have the original 4 seasons, which would be the Fox era. Then you have the movie era, which the DVD era, then the Comedy Central era, and now the Hulu era, which will be at least 2 10-episode seasons.
Uh-huh. So one of the things that I noticed right off the bat is it seems like they're trying to be a little less evergreen than they historically were. You know, like taking Atlantis and replacing it with the lost city of Atlanta, for instance. Like that's pretty evergreen. But like there's a lot of like there's an episode on Bitcoin, there's an episode on Amazon, you know, like it seems like they're sort of trying to steer more into like modern social commentary with this season than I think they have in the past. And that isn't to say that like I'm not pointing that out to say that they failed or succeeded in either way. It was just something that I sort of took away from the season as a whole is that it feels more grounded in the time that it's made or that it was made than like any of the previous ones really did. I mean, you'd see a couple here and there, like the one where they had the upgrade for like the Apple product that was like put directly into your eyeball. Like,
Yeah, the iPhone.
yeah, the iPhone, exactly. But I don't think that like just percentage wise, were there any other like those were the two big ones. I think you kind of had like the weird product episode where there were toys. I think Zap getting canceled is kind of like, you know, the Me Too movement a little bit. They had Rage Against the Vaccine, which was obviously, you know, vaccine, the pandemic, etc. A Bitcoin episode, the Amazon episode. That's what is that? That's one, two, three, uh, four, five, and then the Impossible Stream, which is kind of like calling out to like modern streaming entertainment methods. That's 6 episodes that are really like particularly grounded in this time out of 10, you know, which I think is just a higher concentration of Futurama episodes with that kind of, you know, mentality in mind. I don't know what you think about that statement. I'm kind of curious. I'm afraid to ask too much because I see you like really trying to take care of your voice. I'm like, all right, let me get a really detailed response from you right now.
No, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head where I hadn't considered what you had said, where they're more topical compared to evergreen topics, which I appreciate them trying to be a little bit more topical. I think that's where satire really works well is
Sure.
when you do lock into a particular topic. But I think that's also where this season failed is I don't think they went satirical enough.
Sure. Well, I mean, they've always had an element of satire to them, but it's like in the past, like just I think the perfect character to think about this point through is Elzar. It's like the world wasn't like screaming for the year 3000 update to Emerald Lagasse. But that's what they were going to do because it's funny and everybody got it at the same time. So it's like it's a commentary on something that's happening that we are all kind of aware of, but we're not really paying attention to the same degree as like you would the vaccine or Bitcoin or Amazon, etc. So like I think that's I don't think that they fell flat or failed in turning it satire. I think that what I actually feel is that they missed an opportunity to kind of do that sort of, micro commentary on like funny little things that like are just sort of happening that we're all aware of that maybe don't get as much of the spotlight that could be satirized on in like this fun little way, like I would love to see, let's see what would be like, think about it this way, what would be a fun thing that would be like Emerald Lagasse that everybody's heard of, that nobody's really satirizing, that maybe everybody kind of likes, right? Like it's actually kind of a,
Yeah, I don't know if there is anything like that
I
anymore
started
because
this, I realized I don't have an example. It's writing is hard.
that's why we don't do it for a living.
That's right, we just talk about it.
Yeah, I really don't know what there would be in this modern era. Would it have to be, if you're sticking in the lane of cooks, would it have to be what's his face from Hell's Kitchen or whatever?
Gordon Ramsay.
Yelling, yeah, Gordon Ramsay.
Well, I
Or
think
Guy
of it more
Fieri.
like, I think of it more like what would it look like to sort of riff on the concept of SNL? What would it look like to riff on the concept of like Airbnb or like Uber, but not make that like the focus, just make it a part of the world build, like, you know
Yeah.
instead of having like one blanket concept with the vaccine. And again, I'm just spitballing here, I'm not saying they did anything wrong and I could improve it in this way, but I think that it's good to sort of look at something and be like, well, like what is it that I liked, what is it that I would like to see more of. I think that actually helps writers if they're in a position where they hear people say, you know what, I thought you did a good job with this. This is kind of what I think that I would like to see, and I don't really know how to do it that well, but like if you could, that would be something I'd be interested in. So
Yeah, this season it felt like they were trying to do a lot of modern things, but they were also still kind of keeping themselves pigeonholed in the concept of like we still have to look at this through Fry's perspective, that it's the year 3000, 3001, 3002, whatever. But then they also skip ahead where they still say it's like in real time with reality, so it's 3023, and it's been 20 years since Kif and Amy had their kids. So like now we have to do an episode where Kif and Amy raise their kids now that they're no longer tadpoles. And like that's one of my least favorite episodes of the original Fox era, but it was funny to see them come back to it where Amy's like, "Oh, I'm ready now," even though in sitcom rules Amy has not technically aged, but they're also now having this weird conversation of like Amy was a grad student mid early 20s in 3002, and now it's 3023 and she's still an early 20 somethings grad student, but 23 years has passed.
Yeah.
And like we're in this weird era of like over analyzing everything, so like it's a weird continuity concept that
This being in a weird era of overanalyzation is actually kind of like when you put that on top of what we were just saying about like, doing commentary on bigger and smaller subjects. Like in an era of overanalyzation, is it even possible to kind of find those things the same way that they did the first time? Like, do you have like small, like, well-known celebrities who are still kind of like more niche, like Lucy Liu was back in the day? Like she was a major celebrity, but she was kind of niche, and like, is that a thing? Elzar, again, just going back to Elzar, is that a thing now that we're in this era, like you said, of like over analyzation? So like, do you have access to the same kind of comedy where you can like take those little things and sort of like splice them together in a new world the same way, or do you have to take like the big concepts because like nothing's, you get what I'm saying? Like that's kind of a
yeah, and
interesting way to look at it.
this season felt really nostalgia baity in a lot of senses, like coming back to Kif and Amy's kids. We even go back to the moon in the Mamazon episode where we see the moon mascot again, and
That poor guy.
yeah, the moon farmer and his three beautiful robot daughters, which the Crushinator has a new voice again. I hate that they keep changing her voice.
Yeah, it felt like they
nerd in
really
me-
nailed it the first time. No, Pa, I love him. It's like,
yeah, and then they, for whatever reason, they keep changing it. I'm like, but how did you not think that was the good one?
well, maybe it was a voice actor issue. holding off for a
Maybe.
better contract. I mean, that is one thing. So it started out pretty strong. The first episode, like, actually really drilled into like what it means to put these episodes together. And I guess if there's like a through line that's being developed on my commentary, is that, the first episode was like, what does it look like to watch every television show that's ever been made? And then, it becomes to the point where it's like, well, he's so outside of reality after seeing so much TV that we have to keep making episodes for him. And it's kind of funny to look at like production through that lens, through the Futurama lens, and I guess simultaneously sort of get a feel for like this underlying truth of how difficult it is just to like keep putting a show out, even one that's as heavily loved and bankable as Futurama. There's still like this insane challenge behind it. So
Yeah, that first episode, I felt like it was a better Comedy Central era version episode. I didn't love it. I didn't think it was the strongest episode they could start with, but I do agree that it was more of them driving home a point
mhm.
than it was them being like, "We're back, baby."
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And that's sort of the dichotomy that I'm looking at when I think about the season. Is on the one hand, I have a lot of respect for the difficulty of it all. I have a lot of respect for the fact that I'm still getting something that I love. I have a lot of respect for these characters, the journey that I've been on with them, etc. But it's also the case that like you bring up the first episode being a little bit of a letdown. I think the last episode was a little bit of a letdown because it was, you know, okay, we get it. You're gonna do this like really sweet, high science minded, uh, telling of the Fry and Leela love story. And there were parts of it that were really good, and I thought that it was a very interesting theory. Like it was an interesting, not theories. Theory is not the right word. It was an interesting plot device to have like the tiny verse and like to keep going down and try to figure out like what's real and what's not real. It was fun. It was done well. It's hard to do a thing that complex in 30 minutes, but I think they did it relatively successfully. But at the end, it was kind of like, okay, well, this is just another, like, you're expected to end with this really sweet Leela Fry moment. Ah, the sounds of New York. Ah, the sounds of New York. And then you just played like the theme song.
There you go.
Yeah, but where was I? So and it's not like that's bad. It's not a bad thing. Like they're doing it because they've done it several times before, and it's something that has been very successful and very enjoyable. But you see it again, and it's like it just keeps diluting itself further, almost the same way as like that episode with Jurassic Park, the episode everybody, if you know a Futurama episode, that's probably the one that was sort of flattened when they did the Bender's Big Score, where it turned out that like he actually didn't wait forever. He was just like fast fossilized because Bender tried to shoot Fry and ended up turning him into, what was his name? Lars.
Seymour?
Lars. No.
Oh,
When
yeah,
he
Lars.
Yeah, he got shot and burnt his voice, much like your voice right now. Lost all of his
Yeah.
hair. you know? But like
Yeah.
that really like sort of flattened the moment in the same way that I think that we're starting to flatten the whole like science forward, sentimental Leela and Fry thing. Like, you expect a certain amount of like freshness from a show like this, and then getting back to why that ties into the first episode in your commentary is like, how realistic is it to just like expect it to keep being fresh? And like, how upset can you be when it starts getting stale? you know
Yeah, speaking of the Fry and Leela thing, I was curious how they were gonna work that in, because so Fry has that 10-second time button in the last episode of the Comedy Central run, where the quote unquote series ends at this point where the professor's like, we'll go back to the very beginning and we'll do it all again.
Yeah,
And so
it's a
like,
great episode.
very good episode. Sky reference, the impression that I get
Oh,
is
nice.
that
I remember. Never had to knock
to
on wood.
knock
Yeah.
on wood. Back to Good Burger as well, less than Jake. But the impression that I got from that point is that Fry and Leela are going to go back to episode 1 essentially and relive their lives, and they're just kind of stuck in a loop at that point, or at the very least going back to before the point before he creates the button. So Fry and Leela aren't in this like, they're not in this definitive relationship, but when the series comes back in the Impossible Stream, the show goes, they're an item, they're together.
Yeah.
and I was curious how they're going to handle it. And for the most part, I think they did okay, but they did paint themselves into a corner because there is some agency that's lost in Fry's motivation
Hmm.
because he is now with Leela.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got a little bit doofier of a role in the show, like when she falls in love with the Prince of Space. And he's just like, "Well, I want you to be happy." And like he actually duels the King of Space so that the woman that he loves can marry the Prince of Space. And like it's the whole thing was just like, "What are you doing?" Like that episode went hard. Like that episode went
I
really
I
really
really I liked that plot, but like that's like a third of the episode, and then 2/3 of the episode are these stupid ads that are
toys.
also like mini episodes, like vignettes.
Uh-huh.
And I was just like, okay, I want to go back to this thing. I'm invested in this thing. Let's go back to the medieval times with the weird space walrus people, and
I
why
mean,
Leela's in love with the prince of the walruses.
and I love the way they just explained it away as like science magic. He cast a science spell on me or whatever.
Yes.
But like Futurama's always done that thing. Like I didn't like Naturama that much. I didn't like the whatever Happy Time Fun Hour or whatever where they did like the anime version of them and
I like that one. I like that one because it had a single story that was told through different animation styles. So I like that one a lot.
you like the Rashomon.
The Nature Rama was very highs and lows for me. Like the salmon one was okay. The walrus one was pretty funny.
Get some Robitussin. This is what he's doing for you, his loving audience right now. He is struggling.
I'm trying. I'm trying so hard to make this
I'm
work.
I can keep talking more if you want. Like I'm not afraid to talk a lot. I try to be nice. I'm like I'm not gonna talk too much on this person's show, but if you need me to fill that void, Josh, I'll do it. I'll do it for
Well, I
you.
mean, you'll get the hint when I pull back or something. But I mean, I'm trying to be involved in the conversation too because I do want to have this conversation. You're taking the time to be here, and of course, I love you because like I said, you're the godfather of our show,
Oh,
one
stop
of the
it. What's
two.
happening here?
Of course I've been looking forward to this, and of course I get sick. It's what happens. I meant to make the joke earlier, but again, my throat prevented me from doing so. But like the only time I'll ever get sick is when I'm like bedridden or Justin Henson's going to be on the show, and I can't make it because Justin is like cursed to have to be on the show whenever I'm sick, or like we'll have it planned out for like 2 or 3 months. Like Justin's going to be on the show tonight. And then, of course, my kid gets sick. I get sick. I can't make it home in time. It, Alex and Justin just get to have
Murphy's
fun
out
without
for
me.
you. Murphy's out for you, buddy.
It's something, but I'll be damned if I'm not here for Brendan.
Oh, stop it. And you, the viewers at home, listeners at home.
listeners,
Anyways,
listeners,
listeners,
wherever you may be.
wherever you may be, whoever you may be. So did you have a favorite episode from the season? Just out of curiosity.
I kind of like the Christmas episode. I
Oh,
didn't hate that one. That one was
I
actually
don't know
pretty
why, but
good.
I knew that was gonna be. I knew that was gonna be what you said.
But
I don't.
I found the crypto one pretty funny too, just because I think of all the topical ones, that's
Uh-huh.
the one that really drove home how stupid crypto is.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And
no lies
I
detected
loved
there.
I like how they did do the Futurama touch of like literalizing everything. It's like, oh, it's a data mine.
That's right. That is that is something that I appreciate that they do. I was thinking about this beforehand because I assumed it would come up like sort of it's a good talking point. Like which episode do I think was the most successful? And I think that ultimately if I would like gun to my head had to pick one, I think it's Zap gets canceled.
I was just thinking that one too. I think that one drives the point home really well too.
I think the reason that I liked it so much is, a lot of my commentary so far has been foolishly high minded because that's who I am. I'm foolishly high minded. I enjoy being that. So, like, I'm not going to stop, but like, it is a truth about me. The commentary on why I like this is the opposite of that. Like, it's just basically like a whole society that's like, you never overtly have it stated that they run on farts, but they're running on farts, like they're just like they got their little like gas things. It's like it's like as it's moving through. And when Leela gets like the message on her thing, it's such a stupid little moment. But to me, it's like those little moments are what Futurama has always been about. But she looks down and she doesn't have her big ass contact in, so she can't see on her wrist thingy exactly what it says, but it's like a message from the dupe and it says dupe and she just goes poop. Like, and that was like that was it. There was like no substance. It's just like something that we would all do. We would all be like, we would read a word wrong and it would be kind of funny and nobody's there to catch the moment, but like when you catch somebody else in that moment, you recognize it and it's hilarious. And it adds like a really, I think, rich, like realistic texture to the show whenever it's able to successfully do that. And I think that it does that in those like little cheesy moments. And I think that for that scene alone, I would say that was my favorite episode. Just like Leela going poop.
Speaking of little moments like that, like the Rage Against the Vaccine episode where Hermes is convinced that the virus that they're fighting is a zombie virus, which I I feel like I missed the subtext on that one, or I'm not quite sure, but like that episode was a little bit of a drag to get through, other than like Hermes doing his little trials to figure out who the head voodoo witch doctor is, which ends up being La Barbara. Or was it Barbados Slim?
It was La
No, it was La
Barbara.
Barbara. Yeah, Barbados Slim just happened to have a key to her bayou apartment.
Don't worry about that. Oh man, the same thing's gonna happen to me that happened to Adrian Brody if I don't watch out. I tried doing Fran Drescher earlier. I tried doing La Barbara. I should just accept I'm not an accents guy. It's not a skill I possess.
I'm not going to do it this week just because my voice, but I have a quote unquote British accent that I've been busting out whenever making fun of Joey and Tim. But it's actually just the Wisconsin accent. Oh, hater.
That is pretty Wisconsin.
Yeah. Once I'm done off air, I'll tell you the story about how that originated, because that's a story unto itself that everyone else has already heard. I liked the Hermes side of that, where he's trying to do something and everyone's just getting violent and stupid is the virus.
Yeah,
I like
that is kind of funny.
it.
Just the idea that it's like a rage virus, because like Fry was like, "I'm gonna be with you," and she's like, "I'm gonna beat you up," and he's like, "I don't care." And then like next time you see him, he's just like got black eyes.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a missed opportunity with that one to do another social media episode as well, or at least like do a Twitter style episode, because that's all Twitter is gaslighting.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Yeah. So I guess I would give I stand by my decision. Zab gets canceled, I think, is the best episode. It was kind of nice to see the parasites come back. And that that episode was interesting in some ways. We haven't really touched on that one. I think mainly because it's forgettable, which is something that I'm sort of struggling with this season. Like I noticed you asked like the first time we did a Futurama episode, I was like quoting like 6 seasons worth of material down to like like almost any episode I could come up with a quote from.
Yeah,
And I'm
you and
thinking,
Becky both.
yeah, and I mean and I think that might be part of it. Is like I think that this season's forgettable because there's just so much past material to get through, and you start developing such a relationship with a property like this that it's almost like I say this to my wife all the time, that like even before we were together, like she started kind of being uh like transplanted into my memories, into situations that she was never a part of. And I think that
Hmm.
Futurama is kind of like sort of doing that same thing where it's like affecting my memory because I know so much about a certain period of it that like when something new comes out, it has to fight doubly hard for like that space in my brain because it already occupies such a huge space, you know? And that's sort of, I guess, again getting back to the through line, part of what the writers were up against in creating a new season like this is, you're dealing with something that's as bankable as Futurama, with characters that are as rich and developed, etc. But like the downside to that is they're already taking up so much space in your brain that they're almost like competing against themselves. And consequently, it becomes very difficult for me to remember a lot of what happened in some of the episodes. I know that the parasites were there. I know they were there with Nibbler. I know that Nibbler was getting dumber, and like I think eventually he was just too dumb to really talk. But like, and there was like some glitter or something,
Yeah,
and it was like,
there were parasites within the parasites that prevented the worms from making Nibbler smarter.
yeah. So it was like this entire like parasite ecosystem that they were talking about. It's not like it's a bad episode, but you put that against something like The Prisoner of Binda, where they come up with like a completely new mathematical theorem to like figure out how to get everybody back in their original bodies, and you got like all the robo Hungarian carnies, and like it's just like how do you like top something like that, and how do you, when you have like so many seasons with so many strong episodes like that, create something that competes with that? And I think when you say that this season fell flat, I think that that's sort of what you're touching up on, is that there was
Yeah.
nothing bad about this season. It's a great sitcom. It was a lot of fun. Even the Children of the Lesser Bog episode with Amy and Kif's kids wasn't particularly strong, but like I still liked it. It's still a really good show. But at this point it's like almost competing with itself. And
Yeah, it all still feels like Futurama.
yeah. But again, it's like kind of like Fry sounds older, and now the sweet Fry and Leela science moment is, we've been there, we've done that. I would almost say, I guess I know we're probably coming up somewhat on time for you, but I would say that I would have liked to have seen more Cubert. I would have liked to have seen more. I think that there's an opportunity to kind of keep this world alive in unique and interesting ways. And I think that if enough people were to view this show as something that's like, if we just keep only listening to the things that we like, if we keep only wanting the things that we like, then it's not going to develop in the way that it could. But if we're like okay with maybe the professor moving on, and Amy sort of adopting that kind of role in her own unique way, and maybe is like somehow countered by Cubert in the ways that she's failing to be professory, and then sort of rewrite the dynamic a little bit by having like Fry and Leela being like boring uncle aunts that can like stop by and occasionally drop whatever it is they have to drop. Like, I think it would be cool to develop this show in that way. I think that it would actually be more productive than just kind of cranking out more Futurama in the manner that they did with this last season, even though it's a good show. I think that you're eventually going to dilute what was so great about the original stuff too, if you just keep throwing out stuff just to have it without ever really building on it in that way. So that's my 2 cents.
No, I think that's really well said. I do think they rely a little bit too much on the sitcominess of the show.
Mm-hmm.
To go back to talking about the iPhone episode, I think that's one of my least favorite episodes from the Comedy Central era, just because
I agree.
it ends on such a downer, among other things.
Yeah.
Because the one concept that they really rely on is that by the end of the episode, everything's back to normal.
Yeah.
And in the iPhone episode, especially, it's not. Like Fry and Leela are like the only two survivors of the iPhone pandemic, for lack of a better word, or outbreak, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with at least the Mamazon episode, the universe, or the Mamazon bot expands to the point where everything's like, oh, okay, well, we're just inside a giant Alexa now.
It's the same world. They own us now.
now they just live inside a biodome, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So like I thought that one, it was getting into iPhone territory, but I think they realized where the iPhone episode fell flat, and they were like, okay, people just want the show to end where everything's back to normal. We'll do that. And it works in that Futurama way, like where the professor just like, Eureka, I've discovered the thing. And like, oh, what is it? The thing is already the thing. We don't have to do anything. Hooray.
Yeah. I think that's accurate. Like, and to a degree, it's like how many different ways can you comment on, you know, the ubiquity of big business, right? Like, which is kind of what both of those are at the end of the day. Like, one's commenting on, you know, Apple becoming inseparable from reality part of your life, and you know, this episode is about Amazon becoming an inseparable part of the reality of your life, and it's just sort of like it's so high concept. It's almost like, I guess, getting back to what I was saying about the smaller things, you know how it's like really interesting early on when you have like, you're a big superhero guy, obviously it's in the title of your podcast, but you know how it's like really interesting when like they're discovering their powers and there's like they don't know what the upper limit is, but they're really trying to figure it out, and you know they're kind of weak, and then you sort of just like lose a lot of narrative potential as soon as like, so as soon as Magneto got to the point where he could like lift an entire like continent out of the earth, it's like, okay, well, where do we go from there, you know? As soon as like you make this comment on the biggest business in the world becoming something that's like not capable of being filtered out of the reality of existence, like where do we go from there? It's too big, it's too powerful, and I think that it's really difficult to walk that back too. Like you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. Like we want to go back to like, oh, they're just going to go to an amusement park on the moon to like, you know, deliver whatever it was that they were delivering at this point, the crate of stuffed animals for the, you know, and have like some tiny little adventure where, you know, they meet like some backwoods like dirt farmer on the moon. Like it's that's all very tiny, it's all very tiny stuff, and every now and then you'd have like some big larger than life character that was like a remake of something that we're familiar with, again, like Elzar. He's my favorite example, he's my go-to example for this, and it would like sort of give you this idea that this is a very fleshed out world in, you know, this way that's like not always on the screen in front of you but could happen at any moment. Elzar could pop through that door, and it makes you feel like the reality of Futurama is something that's existing even on, you know, the other side of the world where the screen isn't focused. But once you get to the point where we're at currently, where it's like, you know, the whole world, the whole universe even is Amazon, it's like, well, that tininess doesn't really exist anymore. It's really more about trying to rein in the world than it is in discovering it, which I think is just a less interesting way to do narratives. Like I think it's more interesting to discover than to rein in. So
Yeah, I think that the Mamazon episode is a really good episode to kind of drive home what I was thinking of, what I was trying to say about how like I don't feel like they dove into the satire enough, because like your point about how Amazon is essentially inseparable from our day to day lives, and we're living in the Amazon bubble essentially. Um, they do have a really quick gag essentially about like the working conditions that the Amazon warehouse workers go through, and it's played off as a joke,
yeah,
but you could make an entire episode out of those working conditions. And I think that's where the satire needed to go, but they wanted to go somewhere
yeah,
a
that's
little
right.
more broad.
Yeah, I think that you really gain something by getting kind of micro with a show like this. I think that's 100% dead on and well said.
Well, with that, I'm going to say let's wrap it up because I made a good point. So I'm going to dust off my hands.
Look at you closing out like a boss.
Brendan, do you have any social medias that you want to share, or just direct everyone towards?
I mean, you can check out Unchefed if you want, but you should check out Cultworthy. You should check out Casting Views. You should check out Fuck My Work Life. You should check out Super Familiar with the Wilsons. I love all of these people. Sugar Murder. Like, I just
Decaying with the Boys.
Decaying with the Boys. That's right. Oh my God. I love all those people. I miss you. I miss you dearly. Trust me, I am thinking about you all frequently. And if anybody there heard my voice and was like, this guy seems cool, then you can trust me that these other people seem cool and that you should go listen to them as quickly as possible. Fuck my social media. I'm so happy to be out of that game, to be completely honest.
Fair. It's getting a little overwhelming, as you may well know.
Yeah.
Brendan, thanks again so much for being here. We'll see you in a few weeks for Good Burger 2.
Boom.
And thanks so much, everyone, for listening to our Massive Month programs where we interviewed Matt Groom, Melissa Flores, and Kyle Higgins individually. Those episodes were all really well received and really well regarded. So thanks to Matt, Melissa, Kyle for your time and everyone for listening. Thanks again to Brennan for showing up and being here, talking Futurama. We were supposed to have Becky with us, but unfortunately, time management is not her friend. So
time management
she's currently at the the Cavern on the Greens, writing us a message that we'll read 20 years in the future.
nice reference. I think you should get like little like a soundboard of her just being like or like ooh whenever we say something, just like kind of splice her in that way.
All right, well, you can find us at Talking Smack Pod on all social media platforms, including Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, Hive Social, Post News, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Lonnie's website. Don't forget to email us at tsmackpod@gmail.com with any thoughts, questions, concerns, reviews for movies you've seen or you may have seen or you want us to see. Thank you to Leo Allen for our musical themes that you're hearing right now.
Oh, and Leo.
Beppo for Leo, yeah. Beppo, thank you for our original avatars. Retrorail Studios, thank you for our Ricky avatar. Please like, subscribe, rate, review the podcast on your podcatcher of choice. And again, most importantly, thanks so much for listening, everyone. Take care, and hopefully I'll hear you all next week when I have a better voice. And don't forget to watch Star Trek Lower Decks.
Who loves T-Smack?
I love T-Smack. Is it true? Mm-hmm. I do. Ooh.
Lift up the entire the sounds of New York.